Well, hello internets, here we are. A little bit of a vlog of what's going on in my mind right now. In the past, I have waited, sometimes far too long, to do things. Not necessarily procrastination, but I've waited to have the cash in hand before I did a project, or I did small steps as buying piece by piece until I had all the material or majority of the material on hand before I started the project. And some of those projects that I was collecting parts for or material for never happened. And I missed out on those years of uses because I wanted to make sure that the groundwork was in place before I started those projects. Just as example, I wanted to do windows and weeping tile and proper landscaping in my house first before I built my dream deck. However, it costs a lot of money to do proper weeping tile, proper waterproofing, and proper windows in a basement, and that money never came available by far. Instead, I held birthday parties and family get-togethers, essentially with patio sets sitting on gravel or sitting in the grass. You know, the legs would push into the dirt, the chairs would bend, the gravel was okay, but it wasn't a firm base to have the patio set on. I did build a gazebo, however, because of a low overhead power line, that gazebo was pretty much doomed from the start, because it never could be much taller than about 5 foot 8 tall because of the power line, which kind of makes a limited number of people that could use it, and it felt very closed in and claustrophobic because of the lack of head height. Finally, I got able to build my dream deck, but it was built in like the final, what was it, 2 years, 3 years of living in that house, so it never really did get to see the potential of use. I have learned in the last few years that sometimes it's better to take micro steps or steps in not necessarily the wrong direction, but lateral direction, rather than waiting too long and then never getting the opportunity to do the project or do the item. As an example, in 2019, once again, I had that epic vacation. When you look at it, it was kind of a disaster. I covered a lot of ground in very, very short time. I really didn't get a chance to fully enjoy everywhere I went. And I didn't cover all the stops in between that I went by far. However, that small micro move or small choice that I made has opened up a door for me to realize what is really out there to see, what is really out there to explore, what is really out there to learn about. So that micro move, if you want to say, benefited a lot during that choice. It's just like a lot of people say, well, I would like to exercise, but I can't do much more than walking to my vehicle. Well, I understand. You know, I've been there. I was in a pretty rough place for a few years, and by far I'm still not where I should be by far, but I started, reducing my stress, reducing the crushing weight of the debt and the stress that was essentially crushing me to death got rid of the poison pills the doctor had me on. And then I started cutting back on my portion sizes. You know, just those micro moves made a difference right there over, you know, a year or so. Then I started, when I moved there, I moved to the second floor of an apartment. And just having to do that extra flight of stairs that I was not used to from the house made a lot of difference as well, in combination with the others that I had already done. Walking around the park made quite a difference. However, you know, a 4 or 5 kilometer walk was a lot for me to do. So I started doing the short loop, or walking around the parking lot, or I lived across from a church which had a 50-foot parking lot or so. I started walking the length of that parking lot every time I walked the dog. Then I started walking around the church, around the parking lot, then back to the apartment. And then, you know, after I seen a bit of improvement there, I started walking more at the park, doing the 4 kilometers or so loop, which really, when you think of it, it is only a fraction of what could be walked there. But learning to stay within my limits, within what my body tells me, and not going over, is kind of name of the game per se. You know, when a couple years go by doing a few things, I moved to the 3rd floor of a apartment complex, and I never thought that I ever could do the 3rd floor stairs. However, I seem to be doing fairly well. Bringing up groceries, sometimes I have to pace myself, sometimes takes a day or 3 to get all the groceries up. I start by bringing the frozen and cold stuff up, and the rest can stay in the truck for, you know, a day or 2. And wrestling with those big water jugs is sometimes a struggle, but once again, small moves there and you'll get her all done. Recently, with the 2019 road trip, I find I need a alternative way to carry a little more fuel with the truck. Because there were a few times where the gas light did come on my trip, and I had to use the backup fuel cans, plastic jerry cans that I had, to get me into the next town to fill up. I'm you know, really glad that I had them, because I probably wouldn't have made it otherwise. And I've been wanting to upgrade my reserve fuel system. However, I'm reading and doing research instead of just fumbling blindly. And we have a rule here in Canada about carrying flammable liquids in non-approved flammable liquid containers. And most of the fuel transfer tanks or fuel tanks that I can find are meant for diesel fuel. And diesel fuel and gasoline are a different class of liquid. One is combustible and one is flammable, and the flammable liquid has to be like in a dual-walled tank in a vented area. I forget what it all was, where the diesel can be in, you know, a single-walled tank and all that stuff. So I'm finding that the fuel transfer tanks for gasoline are quite expensive. So rather than not having holidays, or waiting until I have the money to buy a really expensive couple $1,000 fuel tank for gasoline, I'm probably just going to end up buying another 2 plastic 20-liter jerry cans, and then building a wooden box, essentially, a wooden, open wooden box, essentially, to hold the jerry cans. I know I'm basically carrying around the same volume of fuel, as I would be in a tank as I am in the 4 or 5 plastic jerry cans. However, apparently that's a lot safer than having a proper metal fabricated or professionally fabricated fuel tank. So I'm not quite sure what their reasons there is. You know, doing a micro move by building the wooden crate is going to allow me to enjoy the next couple of seasons of adventures and camping. Otherwise, I'd have to wait 2-3 seasons, and you never know, it may never come, right? I've done, like I mentioned there in the past, I waited far too long to do some projects. Sometimes it had to do with money, sometimes it had to do with wanting to film everything that I did for the YouTube channel and not miss out on any opportunities for content regardless of what they were. And sometimes it had to do with my health and my stress, where I just didn't have it to give to paint the hallway and deal with all the unknowns and unforeseen issues with trying to fix up an old house that had multiple lipstick and mascara attempts over the years to hide what was really hiding in those walls. But it kind of is the way that it is. It's some of the things that I learned, some of the things that I have experienced, rather than waiting for your epic 2-week vacation this year, taking little overnight trips for 2-3 nights throughout the season might be the better thing to do, rather than struggling for the year to save up money that never seems to be able to get saved up. But you usually have a couple hundred or two kicking around for that you can get from somewhere to have a weekend trip now and again. You know, remember that not to look at the insanely big picture, to look at the sections of the big picture and work through section by section, piece by piece, and then eventually you have cleaned out that garage or cleaned out that basement or tamed that wild backyard that has been getting out of control for the last 10 years. You know, you have got strength back in your legs, you have been walking in the park, and maybe eventually you can be back on those bikes that you once treasured so much and weren't able to ride for, well, the better part of 10 years. Just a little vlog, kind of showing something that's going on in my mind, kind of is what it is. You may or may not understand what I was trying to say, you may or may not share my ideas, but take it as it is, and around we go. And as always, thanks for watching Maxwell's Vlogs. Comment, subscribe, and enjoy.